professor's voice, teacher's voice, we can project far back there. And with me, I have three very distinguished people. We have Dr. David Globig, is the chair of the accounting program, and he's been here since the early 90s. I won't tell you when, but he preceded me. He came here for a year or two before I arrived on campus in 1993. I did. So I probably have not introduced myself. I'm Dr. Caleb Shane, Dean for the Gates School of Business, and came here as a young faculty. And that was part of my Crossroads too. I had to deliberately choose to come. No one is pushing me. Okay, Caleb, go, go, go. Of course, having a 4-month-old baby at home and needing money to buy diapers and formulas gave me the motivation. Yeah, I think I need a real job instead of the TA position at the Georgia State University, where I got my PhD in decision sciences. Dr. Globig, in addition to teaching, is also director of finance, and that actually was his first position coming into the Swing Harbor. Out of other accounting positions, and he came here as director of purchasing, and he did it for a few years, and then the day president said, I think I got a better job for you. Why don't you go teach? And the rest is history. How many of you are accounting students? Okay, you got quite a few, and some of you in the principal's class, and wonderful. Thank you for being here, and if you are in Dr. Boone's class, you have a paper to write. So take good notes. Sitting next to him is Bol Duot. Am I correct in pronunciation? Yeah. Bol graduated in 2009 with an accounting degree, and after that, he started working in industry. He worked in a CPA firm as well, until recently. He thought, that's not fun. Sitting at your desk, actually, you won't be sitting at a desk after a few years being a CPA or working in a CPA environment, you'll be meeting with clients. But he thought I think I'll choose the industry over maybe an accounting position, because that would give me a lot more flexibility. That was a deliberate decision on his part. Having a young family, this new position at Walcraft, and prior to that it was with a different company, Allperform. Are they the two companies related to one another?
Yep, they're affiliated.
They're affiliated. But choosing a career, working in industry without the stress of being in the CPA environment, gave him more time to give to his family, and to give his young family. And we are pleased to have Bol here, and you can hear a lot of his stories. He also went on and get his MBA at Wayne State University. Sitting next to him is Professor, should I say, Professor Myers, and Christie Myers, and is a 2008 graduate on the campus program, business admin major with the advertising, the public relations minor, and went on and got her the MBA with a focus in public administration from Ashford University, and left Michigan and for Texas, and got involved in so many things. To start a company, as a CEO of a consulting firm, and but also got involved in many places, many opportunities that help build the community. Just live that way. If you go to the LinkedIn webpage, you see a lot of her credentials, and recently they brought her and her husband back to the Arbor, and Coach Myers is back there, being a very faithful audience. They were the ones who came to this room first. I thought, oh wow, if there's no one else coming, at least we have one person in the audience. So, what are we going to do today? And by the way, we also have the media team that doing the recording. So later on, this session will be available since we're only doing it once. Probably battery issues, but well, you have heard me introduce the panelists, and each of these panelists has their stories to share, and the way that we are going to approach this session, since we only have an hour, we are going to have some start questions. I have sent to this panelist some questions that we want to cover, but probably that we will not be able to cover all of them, and we are not expecting every panelist to answer all of the questions. If they do, we'll be here for 3 hours. Probably not ideal. And then, well, we want to open up for some Q&A, and we want it to be a true panel of discussion, a dialogue with our professors and also our alums. And I failed to mention that Professor Christie is adjunct teaching in the comp area, and some of you are here because of her. Am I right? And no one's here because of me. That's okay. I am. Oh, thank you. So, some examples of Crossroads. You might think, what's going on? The Crossroads, I thought everything is all playing out. Decisions were made for me, where I went to school, what I ate, that kind of thing. But life's crossroads. Some examples would be taking on a new job, or quitting a job, having the spring arbor, versus going elsewhere to study. Most of you, all of you, answering your calling. Sometimes it's ministry calling, sometimes it's just a vocational calling. They want to be a teacher, they want to be a nurse, they want to be the scientist, they want to be a business major, so that I can use business as a vehicle to draw people closer to Christ. Moving. Christy and Joe, they moved away from Michigan to Texas. It's quite a long distance. Bol moved, should I say, from South Sudan to the United States. It was deliberate. And I moved to the United States, in Hong Kong, where I was born and raised. And I think that wasn't quite a move, because I came here to study, but the deliberate decision at the crossroad for me was I decided to go on and get my further education, and I decided to get married when I was in graduate school, and I decided to come here, and the rest is history. I've been here for 29 years. Relationships, changes, there are crossroads. Having your first boyfriend or girlfriend, breaking up with your first boyfriend, girlfriend, getting married, these are relationship changes. Becoming a new aunt, uncle, or godparent, those are changes in relationships. Death in family, especially the past couple of years with COVID, many of us have loved ones or know of someone close to us who died because of the pandemic, during the pandemic or other illnesses. So all these things that can potentially confuse us. I think working with the students, I know that the common expression is I'm confused. I had a student emailing me after class on Monday nights as just very good students, and I got 3 emails about homework. Dr. Chen, I'm confused. I'm confused, and should I do this or do that? What that? Well, those are minor things because what the beginning needs to explain. What that? Yeah, well, do this, and then you won't be confused. But when we are at some crossroads that the life brings us to, sometimes we scratch our head because we're confused. So we turn to the right, so we turn to the left, so we stay put. Where's God in all of these decisions, these moments when we have to make some choices? And honestly, my degree is decision sciences. But my wife can tell you that I'm not a good decision maker because I often sit on the decision for too long. I'm a very careful decision maker. I want to maximize on the return of my decision, minimize the error. That is my problem as a decision scientist. But in many of the life choices, you don't get to sit on the decisions. You have to sometimes take a turn. You have to take a turn and just let God take you to the next step. So today we are going to hear from our panelists on the journey, and where and when did they hear God's voice? Was it an audible voice? Was it a small voice that they have always heard? So, without still any further, we are going to jump into the questions. We'll start with Dr. Globig, but maybe quickly tell us what one or 2 stories that remind you that God was there and His voice was clear to you.
You already kind of mentioned the situation I came here. I came here Director of Purchasing Facilities in 1992, at April 20th, a little less than a month, it'll be 30 years. And I had already started teaching back in 1984 because it seemed like a good idea. Someone approached me. I made the mistake that first time I taught of agreeing to teach before finding out what I was supposed to teach. I was teaching people, these are nuclear engineers finishing their masters. And I was often literally half a lesson ahead of them in the middle of class. That's what I'm teaching. And since then, I've been more careful to make sure I knew what I was teaching. But anyways, when I came here, I'd already been teaching, so I started working there in the area of the business office, but also started teaching on the side. Over the next 6 years, it got to the last year I was working in that facility. I was actually doing 21 to 23 hours and 24 hours of full-time. So I was basically doing full-time besides working. And I had an opportunity, my boss and I had an opportunity to go to meet with the president. He said, I said, I really think I'd like to give your job to somebody else and have you just go teach in the classroom. And my response was, what can I think about it? He said, well, actually, we're going to do it anyways. I said, well, I guess that's a good idea. And so that's where I switched over from being involved in the business area to teaching full-time. I still stayed, as he mentioned, I've still been staying in the business area. I'm still responsible for the dining commons, also responsible for doing some budget analysis, and also we buy and sell property. Years probably sell 30 or 40 pieces of property since I've been here. So I still do some of that, which helps me keep involved in what's actually happening. But that's how God led me to teaching, and then over time, and we've had different times where we had other people helping. As we know right now, I'm teaching 12 of the 14 classes. So pretty much if someone's in accounting, we get to know each other really well. And I always enjoy our CPA review night because you're down to just 4 or 5 students. Everybody knows each other, so we have a good time. But again, that's how God led. At the time, my decision could have been, do I go somewhere else and stay in administration? But to me, when you spend time, I try to spend time on a regular basis in God's Word and prayer. Those kind of decisions often to me are not decisions because you just do what you feel God's leading you to do. When we first got married, I took a job making less money in a Christian organization than I had before. My wife quit working, and so we went to less than half our income. We made a commitment at that time, if we ever came to a situation where we couldn't make ends meet, I'd go into secular work. And that was to be 47 years this summer. And so we still feel every time, we just learn how to be tighter and tighter. Because when you raise 6 children, sometimes it's a challenge. But still, if you're where God wants you to be, and you have a peace about it, I find that God gives peace. If God's not giving you peace and you're asking for it, then you're probably in the wrong place. If God gives peace, you're in the right place. It doesn't mean things always go smoothly, but at least you're where God wants you.
Dr. Globig encouraged we can give him a full hour to keep talking about his experience and sharing his way of discerning God's voice. So I just pick up that it's not like I have a decision here I need to make. I'm going to give me some time to make the decision, but all along, God's voice has been with you as you study His Word, in prayers, you know where He wants you to go, pretty much. And now, whether you have 47 years of experience to validate that, well, for a lot of our students in the audience, can I just take his advice, or maybe what I am going to test it out myself? So we'll leave that answer to you. So Bol, and I gave him a nickname. Do you remember? Super Bowl.
Super Bowl, yes.
Well, Bol came to this country, but probably not by choice, I would say, but came here as a refugee. He was one of the lost boys. I'm going to ask him to share with us his story, because not many of us know of the situations that brought him to the United States. And in the audience is also his nephew, another Bol. He is a freshman at Spring Arbor University. So, Bol.
Thank you, Dr. Chan. Can you guys hear me? I'm not a teacher, so my voice may not be loud, so I'll try my best. It's an honor to be here today. As Dr. Chan mentioned, I was born in South Sudan, East Africa, and I came to America at the end of 2000. Some of you may not know, I was one of the lost boys of Sudan. And that definition may, it depends on who's defining it, but the original lost boys of Sudan, because of the civil war in our country, ended up going to Ethiopia, and I didn't go to Ethiopia at the time. But later on, when the civil war kind of came into our village, we fled for our lives. And it's kind of like what's going on with Russia and Ukraine right now, right? You guys pay attention to the news. It brings back memories to me because I've lived that. I've been through that. I remember as a child, as a 7-year-old, guns going off, and I had no idea what was going on. And I knew that, our life was going to change forever. And then later on, we made it to the refugee camp in Kenya, where I spent about 7 years. My nephew, Bol, so I'm Bol, he's Bol. So actually, he was named after my father. So I call him my little daddy. So as far as making those decisions, when we were living in the refugee camp, one of my dreams was to get a better education. And living in a refugee camp, you hear about it, but it's almost like living in prison, because you don't have a job, you're relying on somebody else to bring you food. So essentially the United Nations provide food for us. And that food was supposed to last every 2 weeks. It didn't last for that long. So oftentimes we find ourselves, going hungry. And that was life. What can you do? Your next door neighbor was going through the same situation. So fast forward, at the end of 2000, an opportunity came up for me to come to America. And I remember coming back from school one day, and my mom said to me, "Hey, by the way, your cousin came by, and he's thinking about going to America, and he would like you to go with him." And I said, "Sign me up." She was like, "Wait a minute, hold on, you're a 14-year-old. Are you sure you want to go?" I said, "Mom, I want to go to America." I didn't know much about United States of America, but I knew that it was one of the best nations in the world. So for me to get a better education, America is where I wanted to be. So I came to the U.S. at the end of 2000, went to a high school in Lansing, and then in fall of 2005, I started here at Spring Arbor University. So, and the rest is history.
Wow. One decision after another. I was mistaken by saying that coming to the United States was not a choice. I probably should have said that being part of the Lost Boys is not your choice. Yeah, because of the Civil War and South Sudan. Wonderful. And Christie, and we also have another Christie in the audience, a student in accounting. And will often receive emails from the other students saying, "Oh wow, what are we doing for tomorrow's class?" That kind of thing. So next time, just say, "Well, keep up the good work and pay close attention when you're in class." Christie, yeah.
Yeah, so I was telling Dr. Globig, who had I known that I was going to end up being an entrepreneur, I would have taken a lot better attention in this class. So I am Christie. I graduated here, and our road, and I'm going to focus just a little bit more on the professional side of it for the sake of this, and then how we got back here, was we literally went like this on a map. We got married right after we got out of school. We went like this. Dallas was the closest big city, and we had never been there. We didn't know anyone there, and we left. Some of that was motivated by the weather, and that we didn't love the winter, which we still don't love. And some of that was motivated by, I was born and raised in the Flint area. The economy was what it was at the time, and so just kind of wanting to take a step. And I would call it a leap of faith, but that would give me credit where it wasn't due, because we did it entirely on our own. And we ended up going to Dallas. I lived there for the last 13 years, and I got to do a ton of really cool things. I got to work for the mayor. I worked for the school district. I worked for the superintendent. And then I worked for several different council members. I ran political campaigns. And then after working for the mayor, I was like, I feel like he's making a bunch of money off of the work I'm doing, and so I'm going to go do this on my own. And so I ended up starting my own consulting company, which I still run today. But one of the things that is interesting looking back is there is a lot of your passions, even as students and as athletes, that I get to hear about that are very similar to what mine were. I had this drive to want to be successful, and one of the questions we're answering today is, what was success? And I was trying to go back and think about, what did I really think was successful? And the only thing I could boil that to was making a lot of money and having a really sweet career and being known for something. And so then I was thinking about, okay, I had made it. I had worked for the who's who. I had lunch with Mark Cuban and Brian Cuban, his brother. Like, I had made all of the titles. I was the top 8 female in the country. I was the fiercest female of Dallas. And I was miserable. And I was in the darkest place of my life. And I look back at so much of that, I had all of this insight and all of this like understanding of success from a worldly perspective. And to be really vulnerable with you, I was ready and had figured out how to end my life, because I was so just wrecked. And for me, I wasn't as obedient as the 3 next to me. And so unfortunately, my stubbornness and my drive to be this fierce, independent female, for me the crossroad was my dad suddenly passing. And that was what got my attention. And if I'm honest, I don't know that anything else would have got my attention. I had started to believe that I was only as good as my work. I started to believe that my success was derived from what people said about me, or the worst of them was the lie that I was as good as what people needed me for. And so it left me in this place of constantly seeking affirmation, constantly being, constantly doing. And so all I did was work. From morning until night, all I did was work, and I didn't sleep because there was no peace. There was just no peace in it. And so for me, the breaking point in my crossroads was my dad suddenly passing. And I have to add to this, it had compromised a ton of what, leading up to this point, I would tell you, I was raised in the church. I went to a Christian university. I went to church. I was a really faithful churchgoer, but I was not a Christ follower. And there is a really big difference. And even now, I will tell you, I do the exact same things in my professional career now, but I tell people, even friends and colleagues from Dallas, but I sleep. And it is because I now have balance, and I approach work and I approach my professional life from a place of I'm doing this because these are the gifts God has given me, rather than I'm doing this to make a ton of money. And I will tell you, we are still as successful and we are still as financially stable as we were before, but the entire approach has shifted. And that for me was an unfortunate way that God had to use to get my attention. And though I will tell you, my dad had, for the 6 months, so it happened during COVID, it took him in 2 days. And the 6 months prior, my mom will tell you that he had spent just a ton of time on his knees every single day praying for me and praying for his daughter. He was the only one who really knew what was going on in my life. He was the only one who knew the dark place I was in. And at some point, I believe he just, part of his prayers were probably, take me. It's probably me that will give my daughter's life. And so there's this moment that I see of him entering the gates of like fist bumping Jesus, being like, we got her. And he stands in glory today. And so one of the hardest and most difficult seasons of life, but one that I can point directly back to you and tell you that was the day that God saved me from my professional self and allowed me to go and be faithful. So it's funny because now we are both here back at Spring Arbor, and we may get to this, but part of our story was I filed for divorce. We were 14 days away from being divorced, like in the midst of all of this, and now we're back here at Spring Arbor, and I am coaching tennis, and he's coaching baseball, and we played tennis and baseball here, and I'm teaching, and it was the class I'm teaching now that God used to actually get my dad's attention about his absence in my life. And we joke that God has kind of put us back in this place of, y'all really screwed this up last time. Now let's see if you can be more faithful with this going forward. So.
Wow, that's awesome. Powerful stories, Christie. And wow, you and I connected when you first came back. And I think the suggestion of Professor Nemchek and his Inspector Nemchek that taught in the business school, and she said, well, I think there's something to offer. I suggest that you connect with her, so that I reach out to the Christie at lunch and talk a little bit, but it was like 1/10 of what you have heard from Christie this morning. And well, thank you for sharing those stories and the Crossroads and as I mentioned earlier, well, sometimes you think about, oh yeah, these people, they have been there, done that, and everything that you can hear is going to be, well, good, because well, they're faithful. They listen to God, and they pray, they read His Word. But well, I can assure you that it's not always the case. And sometimes what God used, the if you will, the wrong turns that we took. And it brought us back to the right path. So this is kind of the question that I have for the Bol and Dr. Globig, and were there any turns in your life that you thought, okay, looking back, I could have made a different decision. But also had I made a different decision, where would I be today?
When I was at Faith, I went to 2 or 3 schools that were basically bankrupt and turned them around. It's pretty easy. You spend less than you bring in, you come out ahead. I mean, it's not easy because you got to let people go and things, and I had to go through some when I was younger. But the last school I was, my problem is I tend to be a little too open sometimes. And we had turned the school around. It was doing well. It was basically bankrupt when I got there. And last year I was there, we were doing a budget. And at that particular time, there was a particular budget item that our president said, we need this figure to make it balanced. And I told him, that's not going to work. It's going to be less than that. And he said, we're going to do it anyways. I said, that's fine. So, and unfortunately, I got in the finance committee, and they asked me, and so I gave his number, the $100,000 we're going to defer giving. And then, unfortunately, they said, what do you think? And I wasn't very good at that time to telling him, no, I'm not going to say what I think. So I told him we're going to get $25,000 next year. Well, our president didn't appreciate that, so I was no longer renewed the next year. By the way, they did get $17,000, so I was right. So even you can be right and still. So we went 10 out of 16 months between jobs. When you have 6 kids and you went 10 out of 16 months between jobs, and we had we basically had very little to live on, but we learned how to make through it. And so God brought me here. So some of those times are not easy. So I sent out 426 resumes. That's with a typewriter. I know we talked last night, everybody's even seen a typewriter, and it was not a self-correcting typewriter. And I sent individual responses to every one of those and called 426, and God led me here with some contacts I had previously. So it was not an easy time. Looking back on it, it was probably a good time because I didn't have much. One story I just shared that we just showed God's hand of blessing. My son was in 8th grade. We went to take a test down in Des Moines. We were living 2.5 hours away. My wife had given me $5 to buy bread. And so I went down there at the bread store and just came up in a conversation while what was happening in our life. And they said, here's bread. And we got, I think it was 15 bags of bread, all kinds of things she just gave to us because of that. Got home and I got in trouble because where'd you get all that bread? It just kind of neat. God's never before since provided like that. We didn't have the need to sing. And on the way home, we had 2 dozen donuts in the back seat on the way home. But it was just kind of neat to see God met a need at that particular time, went through a difficult time, that God let us here. So sometimes you go through the difficult times, and God has something better for you in the future.
Bol, had you not decided to come here in the United States at the age of 14, where do you think you would be today?
That's a good question. I think there's a possibility that I could be in South Sudan or in Kenya, where my family is currently living. But the cool thing about what was going on in South Sudan is other countries kind of recognized what was going on and they wanted to help. So that's one of the reasons why we came to America. But also other nations such as Canada and Australia open opportunities for Sudanese to migrate there. So there's a possibility I could have gone next door to Canada or to Australia.
Sure. Well, we're glad that you're here. Let's talk about the aha moments. And often when we make decisions, we obviously some decisions like what I'm going to eat at DC today. Well, there's no consequence, no major consequences. I eat daily, and whether I eat a sandwich or I eat maybe a stir fry, it doesn't really matter. But there are some bigger decisions that would matter, like who you marry. I had a 1-year long-distance relationship with my wife, and back when I was in graduate school. I was at a point where I self-doubted myself whether I should be in the graduate school, skipping my master's degree, going on to a PhD degree, starting out in economics and quickly changed to decision sciences. I thought that economics was fun, but it was very dry with a lot of calculus. No offense to our math teachers, no professors here. But I thought that am I cut for this the journey to be in a PhD program, so that I did not have a good start. But during the time I met my wife, who came from Hong Kong, in the same place that I did, and she was an immigrant, but she lived in New York, I was in Georgia, but we somehow connected, and after a year of corresponding, not cell phone, not FaceTime, corresponding, handwritten letters. And I took up to the courage and said, I have not been to New York City. Do you think I could come over my spring break? And by the way, I don't have a place to stay. I can stay at your place. She said yes and yes, probably not thinking that I'd have something in mind. So the second day of my arrival, I said, well, you know that I like you. So do you think there's any hope that we can develop a relationship? Long distance. I was in Atlanta, she was in New York City, and after the pondering, deliberating on the decisions, she said, I'll give you a chance. But she said, promise me, you're right. So over that next year, I wrote 200-some letters to her that we put in a binder, a 3-inch binder. So I should brought it with me, but I don't want to. If you really want to see it, stay after class.
Is it in Chinese?
Exactly.
Doesn't do it any
Well,
good.
some of those are pictures. Some of those are pictures, pictographic. So we want to go with it a very romantic way. But my story is what I could have not said anything. I could have hidden my feelings toward her, although she probably knows that I like her, right? But that is a deliberate decision that is so extra, so out of ordinary. It was so out of my character, because I was an introvert person. I would find a place to hide my head, dig a hole. What if she said no? And I still have 5 days to stay in New York. Well, God gave me the courage to ask her to bring up the possibility, so that after 1 year, we got married, because there was only 5 times I could see her over that 1 year, and then the rest is history. And we have raised 2 boys, 29 and 26-year-olds now, in this community. The second year when I was here, I thought maybe it's time to go, and I was looking for greener pastures. What do you do when you look for greener pastures? Turn to the left, turn to the right, look forward and backward. But God told me to look down. What's there? The greener pasture. You're right there. So 2 years became 29. And Lord willing, I'll retire here maybe 20 years now. I'm eligible to retire in about 6 years, but like my colleague, Dr. Globig, and 2 other colleagues who are still teaching at their early 70s. I think God has unfinished business for me. So let me turn to the panelists for Christie. Tell us a little bit more about that change, and so about that you were able to make a lot of money, you were successful, but coming back to this small community that we call the arbor, the bubble, and you are suddenly joy-filled. You went from getting close to signing the divorce paper to staying happily married to your sweetheart whom you met here. Can you go in a little more, and what do you think is the formula that the change from a lot of, should I say, insecurity, and you were trying to please other people, and you did not have peace, you lost sleep, but now you can do everything opposite.
Yeah, it really is that drastic too. So I would say, for those who have been my students, I love to operate in what are your 3 points? And so I grappled with, and I think everyone grapples through this decision at several different points in your life, is how am I supposed to make a decision? And this is as basic as how am I making the choice to post on social media? How am I making the choice to eat in the DC, which I would say has more consequences than we give credit for? And then how am I making a choice about what I'm supposed to do with my life? And for me, this has been the huge, drastic difference. Before, my motivation was always, how can I make the most money? Who do I have to essentially beat out of the way to make the most money? And it was kind of go in, I'm going to do whatever I can, period. And whoever's feelings I hurt along the way, I didn't really care. And now my approach is love God, love people, and know my why. And I filter everything, or almost everything, through that lens. And I'm telling you, down to I post very little on social media that is anything other than sharing the gospel or sharing truth. because I have to ask myself why. Am I really doing this for self-promotion? Am I doing this so somebody likes me? Am I doing this so that somebody perceives me in a certain light that quite honestly is inconsistent with who I really am? Or am I putting on a facade rather than am I really using this opportunity to love God, love people, and to further my why, which my why is contingent on loving God and loving people. And so that now, we use the same 3 questions. I work with Brandon Markin. We're a partner with him in a consulting group also. And just yesterday, we asked the same question. We bring together a topic. Hey, we have this opportunity. We have an opportunity right now. We were just given $5 million from American One to support and invest in local entrepreneurs. Well, for any of you who know, entrepreneurship is kind of a man-eat-man world, and a lot of them are told to be as cutthroat as possible. And Ken, our third partner, and we've all learned that the man-eat-man world is a really disastrous formula. And so we are now approaching what is going to be a huge investment into local entrepreneurs of how can we teach these people, even if they don't love Jesus yet, that they need to, like, the same approach. How do we show you balance in your workplace? How do we show you balance in how you have a family and have a career? How do we show you to serve? How do we show you humility? Well, I can't show any of those things if I'm not first practicing it myself. And so one of the things that Professor Chan just said that I try and focus my students and even my players in is we are so focused on what are we going to do 5 years from now that we lose sight of where our 2 feet are today. And I'm going to just lean into, I said this to some of the folks last night who come to the porch on Tuesday nights, but I meet with students almost every day. And most of them are asking the same questions. How do I figure out what God is calling me to do? Do I think He's calling me to do a different profession? Do I think He's asking me to do this? And I have to lean in and ask the question, how are you doing today with the things He's given you? You're so concerned about what God wants me to do in 5 years, which planning is great, just be ready for it to crash and burn, but you're not reading scripture on a daily basis. I know to some of you that sounds boring, but I promise you it's life-giving and it's going to be the only thing sustains. Some of you are in relationships you shouldn't be in. Some of you are like holding the torch of I want to go be a disciple, I want to go be a light, and you won't, sorry to use a 3-letter word, but you won't stop having sex with your boyfriend or girlfriend right now, yet you're asking God to say, hey, will you tell me where you have me going in 5 years? Well, be faithful with what He's given you today. I said last night too, like, you live with more people right now than you will ever again in your life. And your opportunity to dig in and to love people and to love them through the love of Christ is far greater now than it will be quite potentially ever again in your life. We all live with 4 or 5 people in our households, or 1 and a dog. You just don't get these opportunities. And so I think we've really, just as professionals and as professors in your life, not intentionally or even unintentionally, we have pushed y'all to think so much about what your future holds that we've not equipped you to live really well in the here and now through the lens of how do you love God well, how do you love people well, and how do you really discern your why? Because I promise you, you're going to get so many different choices in life of who you're going to date. First question, does he or she love God, and do they love people? Yes? Yes? That's probably a great person to go and date. If you're like looking for other factors, that's going to be really messy. Same thing in your professional life. I have friends who say, one of my best friends, she calls me, she's miserable, she's been in 4 jobs, she doesn't love Jesus yet, and she's changed jobs. And my perspective on that is, she says, I'm just not happy here, which I could go on a whole like broad of happy and what that means. But God has you in these places. He has you in Spring Harbor. He has her at these places. He has me in my workplace. And if I'm not impacting the people who are there, if I'm not loving them well, of course I'm going to be miserable. And of course I'm going to be always seeking the greener pasture on the other side. But I feel like often we're so self-serving and looking for what are real intentions behind wanting to take a new career, to take a new boyfriend or girlfriend. Like, until you're really willing to take the hard look at yourself, again, through the lens of loving God, loving people, and understanding your why, you're going to flounder. And I know you think, oh, you're old, you don't know what you're talking about. Like, I promise you, you're going to flounder. Like, it just is what it is. The patterns of life find themselves repeat.
If I can make a comment on what you said about Scripture, I think often people forget the importance. They think, oh, I've read that before. My mother modeled this, kept track of how many times she read the Bible. I've finished the Old Testament 64 times, the New Testament 76 times. I finish it probably more than once a year. You say, why do you do that? You read it before? Now I'm looking for various phrases. Is there a certain thing you replace it yourself 3 times and trying to keep focused? You do that kind of thing. I've been involved in prayer groups for the last 50 years. Doing that consistently, you're where God wants you to be today. She says, if you're serving people, that's why we had 30 foster kids, adopted 3. You're helping other people. That's why we started giving to missionaries 40 years ago and still do. It's not because God needs the money. We need to recognize everything we have is His and we're a steward. If you do that, most of these other issues become non-issues because you're doing what God wants you to do, and therefore you just feel His presence. If you don't, and you're asking for God's direction, He's given it to you, you haven't read it. I would guess most of our campus has not read the Bible more than once, maybe for a class. If you read it regularly, time after time after time, it's like a child's mobile, it keeps moving. What you look at today is different than last month and different than next month. God can show you something now that you wouldn't have seen, and next year He can show you something else, but you got to spend time in God's Word. It takes time, I understand. It's kind of like me telling you need to read accounting. If you don't read it, you won't get it. Read God's Word. That's His love letter to us. If we don't read it, what does He want me to do? For crying out loud, He's told you, just listen.
Yes. I want to add just one thing too. This is something that we all do. We're all guilty of, but I think especially the college mentality that I would encourage you to try and rid yourself of is when I fill in the blank. When I get a boyfriend, when I get a girlfriend, when I graduate college, when I have a baby, when I get married, like all of the, in opposite order, sorry, it is really important. If you don't deal with that mentality now, you will deal with that mentality, and it will rob you and steal a ton of joy from you because you're always waiting for the next thing, the next raise, the next promotion, the next job offer, the next, like, you are just always waiting, that you lose the ability to really live in the here and now and be able to enjoy the gifts that God has given you today.
My son gives good counsel when people come to him. He says, how do I work? Well, I'm not getting paid really well, so I'm not going to work hard. He says, work the best you can where you are today. Tomorrow will take care of itself.
Amen.
I'm only getting $10 an hour. Work the best you can at $10 an hour.
Yeah.
If you do that, when you make 50 or 100, it won't be a difference. But if you get used to not working because I'm not getting paid that. When he was here, he was going into his freshman year, they were wiring the dorms. He was with 3 seniors. They were doing all the computer wiring. It's been a while ago. Anyways, they would wire one wing, the other 3 would sit there and wait. He would start the next wing. That was at age 18. That's probably why he's the CEO today. Because he saw then, it needs to be, we know we do 17 wings. We're going to do each one. I know how many wings because I used to check them. But all I'm saying is, he knew he had to do the next one. So you do the next job. When it needs to be done, you don't wait for someone to tell you. You're going to be in a different position if you wait. What do I do next? I'll sit here for 45 minutes till I tell him. So you do your job right now. Take care of it.
Kind of going to piggyback on what Dr. Globig said. When I was in Kakuma refugee camp, we had schooling, and the schooling in the refugee camp was not the best, right? You had 100,000 people in refugee camp, probably maybe 20 schools, so lack of resources. But I did my best in school, and I think that was one of the reasons why I came to America, because my cousin knew that I had potential. So to kind of allude to what Dr. Globig said, I prepare myself. At the time, I didn't know, I didn't know what my education was going to lead me to, but I prepared myself for that opportunity, and I came to America, and I did the best I could.
And when he was a graduating senior, he was the one who was awarded the Christian Service Ministry for the campus.
Let's open up for questions. You have a question for the panel? It's a good time. I'll count to 5.
If I could think, while you're thinking, notice she mentioned she was consistent in her church attendance. One of the biggest challenges you're going to have when you graduate is no one there's going to be encouraging you to attend church. So even when she wasn't where she wanted to be, she was consistent. If you're in church, then you can be ministering. I have some of my kids that do everything online. I'm sorry, doing something online in a different state is not the same as having your local church. That you find out that Susie or John needs some help. And if you're ministering locally, serving people locally, that'll take care of a lot of issues. It's easy to sleep in. I know the last 2 years have been challenging, get used to sleeping in. But instead, if you're actually in church ministering, serving others, what did Christ do? He came to serve. As Christians, we're supposed to be little Christ. We should be serving others. And there's always opportunities for different kinds of service.
Okay.
Ask questions. Always ask questions.
How many are graduating in a couple months? Okay? Ask questions. You just have your hands up. You have a question. Jacob.
No, I'm going to need some more time. They covered everything.
Okay. Brendan's not graduating, but here's the question.
Would you guys say that coming here, either working or attending school itself, was also a big crossroads for you guys as well?
Yes. Oh, I'll say coming here for a career now was a huge crossroad. I laugh about it. I never thought I would appreciate cornfields so much in my life. But it's very different. And if had anyone told me 2 years ago, you're going to be back in Spring Arbor and investing in students' lives, I would have told you were absolutely crazy. But it is the most fulfilling chapter that I've been given, and I don't make light of that. I'm really thankful, but an absolute crossroad.
In our family, there was four of us. 2 went to Ohio State, and 2 went to Christian schools, Cedarville. 2 are in ministry, and 2 are not. It's a 1-to-1 correlation. That's probably why I think of a certain school during the fall, but you probably understand.
Something to pick up on the Dr. Globig that I had not thought about before, because I had not shared in this fashion. But when you decide to do work in a Christian organization, institution, and your wife talk about it, and you say, I would stay where I am until there's not enough money, then I'll consider it a secular position. Wow, that is, I think it's a very good principle. Even for me, sometimes I think, is there something else beyond Spring Arbor? I have given my life, my career to Spring Arbor, 29 years, the best of my 29 years to Spring Arbor. Well, is it time to go? Is it time to do something different? But that principle is very good in the sense I have asked myself what would be my motivation if I go to a different place? Well, I think maybe money, maybe to be in a more prestigious position, school, or career, to finish up until I rather retire. But when you look at, if God is providing everything that I need, we need, my house is paid off, if I don't have any loans, that I need any debts, and my children are grown, well, what else could I ask for? My earlier formula of success would be, money. There's the PhD, I thought I need to do something to maximize on the return of my investment. I put in so many years of my life to education. Well, I probably should go for a job that would pay me, if not double of what I'm earning right now, at least more. But that formula is not really going to matter if you don't have the peace, if you don't have the joy, if you don't have the love. I'm thankful, I'm grateful that every day I go to work, I don't have to feel like, I really don't want to go to work and it is not 72 degrees outside and the weather's poor and I just have lost interest in going to work. But if you're in a place where you're able to continue to pursue your passion, you have the God-given talents to put to work in an area that you can make a difference. That is your sweet spot. That's your greener pasture. So hopefully what our stories have been helpful to you.
I think about maximizing return. You can look at financial return. I understand the ROI and all those kind of things, but often investing in people. Because what happens when the market dropped 2 years ago? Some people were just devastated because the market dropped, and they sold, which is the worst thing you can do. But anyways, instead, you invest in people, and it makes a difference investing in people instead of investing in these other things that really, in the long run, at the end of a person's life, it's not how fancy a car they have, because we've tended to have very inexpensive things, live very frugally, because we felt it's more important to invest in people and also invest in giving. Giving often you think, well, this is just asking for money. No. Giving is respecting the fact that God owns everything. And if God owns everything, is what am I doing to serve Him with what I have? And if you do that, guess what? Somehow He takes what you have and just multiplies it. Because we've been very generous in our giving, but God gives us more, and He's got a bigger spoon than we do. And so if we do that, God will give us blessing there. But otherwise, I see people, my brother made more than I did most of his career. And he almost lost his house after he retired. So I realized that just having the resources, if you're not a wise steward, it's really not going to be very successful.
One of the things I would love to just make sure is heard to you is just the constant reminder. I know y'all hear this, you hear it in chapel, and you're going to hear it right now, and you're going to be like, man, heard that. Like, this life is just not about here. It truly is about our life eternally. And I know that is sometimes really hard to grapple with, especially for those who are about to go into a professional career and how to navigate that. But I promise you, if you start filtering things through the lens that it's just not about the here and now, and it is about eternity, it starts to shift your entire focus. One of the things I would tell you to start with, if you're going into whatever career you're going into, understand, know, study, and memorize Isaiah 43:1. Excuse me. It is that God has redeemed you, He has called you by name, and that you are His. And the reason that is so important is because if you do not understand it and know it, you will constantly be trying to shove whatever else you can in the gap that was created in your heart. Whether it be money, whether it be addiction, whether it be people, whether it be relationship, whether it be work, you are just going to constantly be filling if you do not understand what that truth is. The final thing I'll say, this is a book that the team and I just started reading. It's called The Faith-Driven Entrepreneur. It's by teaching pastor J.D. Greer out of North Carolina, and then a couple of pastors teach alongside him and entrepreneurs. And it just gives a ton of really great insight about how to properly approach the workplace while also being a person of faith. And so just as a resource, and it's something I would encourage you on.
Can I just say a final word?
Yes.
So, two of my favorite Bible verses that I want to share with you. One of them is Proverbs 3, verse 5 and 6. And it says, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Him, and He shall direct your path. And then the other one is Matthew 6:33. It says, seek ye first the kingdom of God and His righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you. Those verses are very important to me in my life, and I try to abide by those. And Dr. Globig mentioned earlier about the concept, and I won that award, but it was funny because when I was accepted at Spring Arbor, I was handed this slip, and I thought I had to memorize it, so I did, and it stuck. It has stuck with me, and it's funny, I memorized it in 2005, and in 2009 I won the award. I don't know how that worked out, but it has stuck with me, and it says, Spring Arbor University is a community of learners distinguished by a lifelong involvement in the study and application of liberal art, total commitment to Jesus Christ as a perspective of learning, and a critical participation in the contemporary world. You know, by living by those two verses is my way of participating in the contemporary world.
Can I leave one last nugget?
Yeah.
This is something, again, I see in y'all, and I see we're all guilty of it too. But just because you're busy does not mean that you are effective. And it is important to also grapple and pick apart, why am I busy, and am I being effective?
Well, I thought as an employee, I've seen it here with different situations where you have a change of benefits or whatever, and people are really upset, I'm thinking, did God lead you here? If He did, is He leading you away? No. Then you need to accept what's happened. Now, do I always accept those changes? No. But if you don't, you're really being a pain in the neck to everybody around you and yourself, and you're not happy. So either God is leading you away, which is okay, or He's leading you there. And if He's leading you there, then who are you really upset with? You're actually upset with God. That's not a good place to be. So if God's leading you someplace, unless He's leading you somewhere else, accept what you have and use it for His best. And if you do that, it makes it much easier to work. Because otherwise you're upset with God, and that's not a good place to be.
Thank you to Wisdom for teach about the panelists. You helped me to thank them.